So I guess we might as well get started. We don't, unfortunately, have all the candidates here. Liesl McGuire apparently called in sick at the last minute, and Dan Sullivan declined earlier due to a previous commitment. But we have plenty of folks here to have a good discussion and a lot of issues to talk about. And then hopefully, as the year progresses, we'll get a chance to have all of the candidates together. So I'm going to ask the candidates. We have Bob Williams in the middle here. He organized this event, and we have Senator Hollis French, a Democrat, here. Both Bob and Hollis will be running in the Democratic primary. Craig Fleener is running as an independent, and so you will get to continue on to the general election. This is really not a race for you. But what I'd like to do, and we'll start with Hollis here at the end, for each of the candidates to introduce themselves with an opening presentation. 2 minutes.
Will do. Thanks, Rhonda. Hello, everybody. My name is Hollis French. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I love public service and because I think there's so much work left to do to bring Alaska to its fullest potential. My background and my work in the oil industry, my background and my work as a state senator and as a district attorney have all prepared me for this job. I'm focused on 3 issues: energy, education, and elections. I'm sure we'll talk more about elections during the debate about what the Lieutenant Governor has to do with that. But as to the first 2, as to energy and education, I really think these can be the cornerstones to a prosperous future for you, for the people who are listening, and for the rest of the citizens of the state. No matter where you live, whether you live in urban Alaska or rural Alaska or somewhere in between, lower cost energy will make you more prosperous. No matter where you live, a powerful education system will help you, will help your family, will help your community prosper. My long-term vision for the state is one in which we invest in renewable energy projects and sell our valuable oil and gas to the highest bidder. This, of course, means reversing last year's giveaway on oil taxes. I fought against SB 21 during the session, pointing out the lack of any quid pro quo in the bill. It was a one-sided gift to the oil industry. We lost that battle, but I was proud to work this summer with Vic Fisher and others to gather the signatures to put ballot measure 1 before the voters this coming August. I believe in the inherent common sense of Alaskan voters. I expect the giveaway to be repealed. Thank you. I look forward to this debate tonight. I look forward to the coming months of debate leading up to the election.
Bob Williams.
Hi, my name is Bob Williams, and thank you to everyone. Thank you for coming. I'd like to thank Tracy Morgan of YWCA for letting us use this as a venue. Would like to thank Tracy Lohman for volunteering to work late and be here so we could have this venue. My name is Bob Williams. I'm a teacher, born and raised in Palmer. My father came to Alaska in 1949 and had a homestead out in Matsu. Had a one-man sawmill. My mother came here in the late 50s and was a nurse at Providence Hospital back on what is on L Street. And when they got married, moved out and was a nurse at the Valley Hospital. And I grew up with a very strong work ethic, having a father as a logger. If I didn't work fast enough or I wasn't quick enough, my father would yell at me and said, "If you don't get working quicker, the only job you're ever going to get in life is with the government." And so I developed this very strong work ethic. And I've taken it with me. I'm a teacher, and I work very hard to be the very best teacher I can be. And if you come into my classroom, you're going to find every single student has 3 cups on their desk. And on the top cup is the green cup. And if they understand everything and it all makes sense, they're going to have the green cup. If it's a little bit shaky, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, they have the yellow cup on top. And if it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, it's the red cup. We're going to have lots of time to talk about a lot of different issues, but I want you to know I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because there's a lot of red cup issues facing the state of Alaska that are taking us in the wrong direction. And I plan to get in there and do everything I can to make us a green cup state. Thank you.
Craig Fleener.
Thank you very much. Is this okay? All right, thank you very much, Rhonda. Good evening, I'm Craig Fleener, and I'm running as a nonpartisan, non-affiliated candidate free from party politics and corruption, to be your next Lieutenant Governor. I am Alaskan from Fort Yukon, a Cochin warrior, an Athabascan. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, an Alaska Guardsman, a biologist, a firefighter, a fur buyer, an aircraft mechanic, and a janitor. I'm a father, a grandfather, a husband, a Christian, a moose hunter, and a woodcutter. My ultimate goal here is to bring Alaskans together to solve the problems that plague us all. Whether it's affordable energy, safe communities, an education system that meets our needs, or abundant fish and game populations, Alaska needs a better and brighter path forward. For me, this race isn't about party. It's about Alaska, about partnerships, about community and business working together, about rural and urban, about native and non-native. I've spent my entire life working aggressively to bridge these divides while advocating for the independent Alaskan values that unite us all. Alaska's political system has suffered from a disastrous decade of poor leadership, from iron fist politics by some and meek mannerisms of others. Poor leadership is bringing Alaska to our knees, and it's evident by inaction, a looming fiscal cliff, wasteful billion-dollar giveaways, and never-ending studies that do not deliver. When I'm elected, study hall will be over. It will be time for action. Alaska will begin to move forward with a re-energized commitment to make her strong again. We will develop Alaska's infrastructure to create more opportunities, enhance access for fish and game resources and oil and mineral development, empower local governments, including tribes and cities, to resolve issues at home, recapture Alaska's sovereignty by acting sovereign, building the roads we need, restoring fish and wildlife populations, and holding back the onslaught of an overzealous, overreaching federal government. We will develop relationships once again and begin to work more closely with tribes to create unity in Alaska. We'll enhance public-private partnerships that empower Alaskans and ultimately bring down the cost of government and improve service delivery. And finally, all of this while keeping the government out of the lives of liberty-minded Alaskans. Thank you very much.
All right, so we've had opening presentations from each candidate. And I thought that one of the things that we would do is kind of start with generalities and then get to specifics. But I'm curious, and we'll start with Bob so we can rotate the candidates. What do you think was the best idea ever hatched in Alaska politics? The best thing that government did?
I would say that the best thing that we've done, becoming a state, becoming part of the United States of America. I'm very proud to be an Alaskan, very proud to be an American. And if you look at the leadership that came together to bring us into the United States of America, it took a long time. It wasn't easy. It took 6 days of debate in the Senate to get there. And when it passed, there was a joke that it was Seward's folly, that it wasn't going to make any, that it was ridiculous. And so the leadership that came and pushed against that kind of opposition and finally brought us into the United States of America, I think is one of the best things that our political leaders have done.
Craig?
It's really hard to top that one. Becoming a state is a pretty phenomenal step forward. But I think one of the things that I'm most proud of our forefathers for doing is sustained yield and making sure that we manage everything for the benefit of all Alaskans. That it's a constitutional mandate that we do, that what we do for the benefit of all Alaskans, not any one individual. That it's not just about business and making the most buck, but it's a benefit across the board for all Alaskans.
Hollis, your thoughts on what was the best political policy or idea ever hatched?
I brought a copy with me, the Alaska State Constitution. It's an act of genius. When Vic Fisher and the other 54 delegates worked that horrible winter in Fairbanks to craft the Alaska State Constitution, they had the benefit of 200 years of experimentation in other states. And they really worked hard to glean the best aspects of those constitutions and put them to work for us. We don't have elected judges here, we have appointed judges. We have a strong right to privacy. We have common ownership of our mineral wealth. These things are embedded in the bedrock of Alaskan landscape, and they're embedded in our hearts, and we carry them with us every day. I was honored to be, for 6 years, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And having that role and watching the laws that passed through that committee and that we worked on all come from this idea, from this fountainhead. And so I'm a big fan of the Constitution. I'm glad you asked the question. It's nice to be able to wave the flag because this is what we all swear to uphold. And this is what I'll do if I'm Lieutenant Governor.
So I guess that leads naturally to the next question is, if another great idea, another policy could be hatched to affect the future of Alaskans, what would that be? What would you like to see happen? I'm going to go with Craig Leaner first.
The next best thing is what you're asking about. What is the next best thing? Well, I think Alaska is so dependent on energy, so dependent on our resources in order to make things work, that I think a good energy policy that really involves a long-term plan. I think Alaska doesn't do a very good job of planning. Therefore, we don't have anything to shoot for. Our plans are short, they're not long-term, they're not well thought out. And I think we need to work together as Alaskans to unite all Alaskans together and develop long-range plans so that we have something to shoot for long into the future. So it doesn't matter if I'm elected or when I'm elected that I'm gone and the next person is elected, we still have the same targets to shoot for. And I think that would be one of the best things that we could do in Alaska, is put some long-range plans together.
Hollis?
The next most important idea we have to do in Alaska is repeal the giveaway. We're going to get our opportunity on the 1st of August of this year. We've got to get our oil tax policy right. One of the most sort of revolutionary ideas embedded in the Constitution and in the Statehood Act is the owner state. We are an owner state. We own those resources in common. I worked 12 years in the oil industry, 5 years on a platform in Cook Inlet, 8 years on the North Slope. And if you had told me then that the oil I was pumping belonged to the state of Alaska, I would have said you're crazy. I would have said, no, that's Shell Oil Company's oil, or it's Atlantic Ridge Field's oil. But it's not. It's not. They pump that oil under legal obligations that we set out in leases. Leases the oil industry agrees to. It's our oil, and we have to believe that, or we're sunk. We will never be able to stand on our own 2 feet financially if we don't get a fair price for our oil.
Bob, what's the next best thing you'd like to see happen?
We could find oil under every single home that we own. We could find that all our mountains are made of gold. But if we do not lower our suicide rate, if we do not lower the rate of violence and sexual assault rate against women, we have failed. We have failed as a state. One of the toughest things I've ever experienced as a teacher has been to have a former student commit suicide. And it happened when I taught in Nome. It happened when I taught in Palmer. It happened when I went out and visited Sabunga and Gamble. We have to find a better solution. And that is the next big thing that we need to solve. And I plan to do that as Lieutenant Governor. I've talked about this with a lot of people. I've spent a lot of time listening. And I've had women pull me aside and say, don't be vague. They said, you have to say that what we're doing isn't working. It isn't working, and we have to do something different.
All right, let's take up some social issues. You agree with the governor's plan to pay down the public retirement debt? And I'll start with Hollis.
I do. I was supportive of the idea when Senator Johnny Ellis proposed it a couple of years ago. It's a way to reduce your long-term costs of that debt. It's just like a mortgage. If you make payments up front, you reduce the back-end financing costs. It's pretty straightforward. It is made more problematic by the revelation that we have a huge deficit this year because of the institution of this new oil tax. I think this idea is going to get a lot of debate, but some legislators may be reluctant to take $3 billion out of savings and put it in a place where it can't be retrieved, given the fact that we're reducing every day and making closer every day the exhaustion of our savings that we put away so carefully over the past few years. So yes, I support the idea.
Bob?
The answer is yes, but I think it's really important to understand the math behind it. If you stop making your mortgage payments, eventually the math catches up with you. And so this was underfunded for a long time, but the answer is yes, I do support it. And we also need to remind ourselves that a lot of public employees hired after 2006 do not have a defined benefit system, and they do not have Social Security. And that we're going to have a very hard time retaining high-quality teachers, attracting high-quality teachers, and attracting high-quality public employees with that. So I do agree with this, but I think it's important to look at the entire picture and realize that we have long-term attracting quality people with the way we've set up our current retirement systems.
Craig, do you agree that that's the thing to do, to pay down the retirement debt?
Well, we absolutely have to pay down our debt. That goes without question. But I think the problem is much bigger than that, and the problem is that we keep growing government. I'm not a big government guy. I think we need to shrink government. The more powerful government is, the less powerful we as individuals are. And I continue to think that we need to do more with public-private partnerships so we don't have such a long-term burden on all of us. And this burden is going to continue to grow. We need to reduce that burden. Yes, we have to pay down our debt, but we don't need to keep adding to that debt every year. We're going to pay it down this year. It's going to be just as big in a few more years if we keep on the same growth pattern that we're on now.
Another big social issue is the Medicaid expansion, which the governor doesn't want to pursue. Your thoughts on that? We'll start with Bob.
Oh, for the love of Alaska, if you've ever looked at one issue in which the Chamber of Commerce, the hospital associations, everyone says there's just a no-brainer decision to make. You're going to bring in well over $1 billion over a period of time. You're going to bring in 4,000 jobs. You're going to improve the quality of life of over 40,000 Alaskans. And to say no to that is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So that was a huge mistake. And we have over 40,000 Alaskans that have a chance to improve their quality of life, and our current governor said no for no reason. And it's ridiculous. And it's a shame.
Craig?
This is definitely a much more complicated question than are you just willing to accept the money. I think if there are no strings attached, then yes, we have to take the money, but we have to look at it long term as well. We should have taken the money. It's an investment that we're already making. It's our money. If we don't take it, California is going to get it, Texas is going to get it, someone else is going to get it. But if in 3 or 4 years from now there's a string attached that says, oh, by the way, you now have to pay 70% of that, then that becomes a problem, especially if you're talking about declining revenue and increasing costs. So we have to look a long way down to the future. This has to be part of that long-range plan I'm talking about. We can't just say yes to dollars today and not think about tomorrow. But really, the answer is yes for right now, as long as there are no strings attached.
Well, we've sort of had a general feeling right now about where the sort of the lay of the political. Oh, we didn't get to Hollis yet. Did you want to answer that question? I'm sorry.
Sure, I agree.
I need to jump ahead.
We should have taken the money. We've had a 55-year policy in the state of maximizing federal investment in Alaska. I don't know when it changed. I don't know why it's changed just for health care. And I think it's one reason why you don't see any Republicans here tonight in the debate, is that I think they'd be forced to defend the indefensible and forced to decide whether they would buck the governor and show independence or whether they would go along with the governor and knuckle under to a really, really bad idea. But many of us find it offensive. I think we're going to be exploring the true cost of the Alaskan economy. Bob mentioned 4,000 jobs. That's a lot of jobs. I hope you all are as wealthy as you ever want to be, because you could be wealthier if there were more jobs out there right now tonight. And that's what the governor said no to.
Well, I think what would be interesting is to kind of mix things up a little bit. And I'm going to raise a topic, and I will count on you to not any one of you to overly dominate the discussion. But I'll leave it to the three of you. I won't interfere for a few minutes.
Scary.
But first of all, I'd like you to think of yourself as a teacher, and you're going to give the governor a grade, the current governor. And then you're going to have to explain to the parent why that grade was given, for better or for worse. So I guess I'll leave the door open. Each of you discuss what kind of grade you would give our current governor and discuss your reasons why. We'll go for a few minutes here.
I'll start. Let's wait and get to the grading at the end. Let's just talk about some generalities and sort of.
No, I want the grade first.
Grade first? D. Okay?
Okay.
D.
F. And I'm a teacher.
Yeah, this is very unfair. We got a teacher here. I'd give him a C-.
I'll give my evidence for the F. It's basically because we have an administration that has been modeling what I call wimpy leadership. And when I say wimpy, I don't mean that as a name-calling piece. Not allowed in my school. However, I mean it as wildly inaccurate, misleading, and partisan. And that's the kind of leadership we've seen from this administration. Wildly inaccurate, misleading, and partisan. So when we have this Medicaid discussion, we can have different views. We have different views at this very table on that issue. But when you have a commissioner of health saying, well, does more care mean more people die? I don't know. That's ridiculous. I mean, there's a New England Journal of Medicine journal study looked at 2012 that showed that Medicaid expansion improved the quality of lives, and it also saved lives. For every 176 people that signed up, it has saved a life. And so we have these things that are wildly inaccurate, misleading, and partisan, and it's ridiculous. And when he talks about education, we talked about just increasing the basic student allocation by $30.6 million. He racked up a whole bunch of tried to say it was $500 million and said it was the ultimate giveaway. Now, if we polled ourselves at this table, I think we can all think of a bigger ultimate giveaway than increasing the basic student allocation. So I just see there's plenty of evidence that we have a wimpy leadership, and this administration has failed the people of Alaska.
Well, I certainly agree with the lack of leadership and really the inaction by the governor. There are a number of things that I could point to. One is, but it's not just this governor. I think it's the legislature is to blame, the governor's to blame. I think many legislatures past are to blame, and that is with the Alaska Native and state of Alaska relationship. There isn't a relationship, or the relationship that could possibly exist has been a terrible one. And right now, if you go to any village in the state of Alaska, they feel as if there's a war between the state of Alaska and tribes. And I think we need to heal that. I think it's been a problem forever. Growing up in Fort Yukon, I can tell you that there has never been any love towards any politician in the governor's office, and very little appreciation for the legislature, because most of them just don't want to work with tribes. And I'm not here to say that if you elect me, that somehow I'm going to magically cure something that's been going on forever. But a real problem is that Alaska Natives they're not invited to the table. If we're going to solve problems between natives and non-natives, if we're going to fix the rural-urban divide, we have to have all the participants at the table, and we just haven't done that. So on this one issue, I clearly give him an F.
I just want to throw out a little more evidence for my F, because if I did, I was the first to give a quick little grade. I would say another example would be when we have the fall source book come out from the state of Alaska, and the Commissioner of Revenue has a cover letter in there that has the statement saying, fortunately, with our new tax regime, we have a method to increase production. That's the thing that we can change. Whereas if you get a book on tax policy, or you look at our tax rates over years, there is absolutely no evidence that changing the tax rate is changing the level of production. So it's just another example of something that's wildly inaccurate, misleading, and partisan. And a lot of times it's just out there and it's not challenged.
All right, well, we'll wrap up this discussion, but since Hollis, you didn't contribute, is there something you wanted to say?
I've been highly critical of this governor in many areas on a lot of different subjects, probably none more so than on the oil tax giveaway. Nothing so threatens the future of the state as the oil tax giveaway, which unfortunately the governor got a pass on during his last election. He was never challenged on what he planned to do about oil taxes. I think most of the people in the state still don't know that he was a ConocoPhillips lobbyist before he ascended to the office of governor. Most people never learn that due to deficiencies in the last election, so I'm glad you're bringing this out. The one area where I have supported the governor, though, is on public safety. He's been willing year after year to add more VPSOs, something Governor Murkowski would not do, something I watched decimate rural law enforcement. And as a former prosecutor, I have appreciated and publicly thanked the governor for doing that one small thing, and I think it deserves at least some mention.
Well, that's good, because we don't have any Republicans here to weigh in, and obviously this discussion is skewed because we have no Republicans. So I'm glad you brought that up, Hollis. Let's turn to the position of Lieutenant Governor. It's one of the things that people have said is that the Lieutenant Governor's position doesn't, quote, have a lot of power. And we've seen various types of relationships between governors and their lieutenant governors. I remember hearing that Bill Egan sent Red Boucher out of state on a campaign just because they weren't getting along very well, and that was his way to deal with them. Governors have cut their lieutenant governors' budgets to rein them in. So it's not always a position in which you can be out front of things. So I guess I want to ask each of you is what value do you see in this position? And we'll start with Craig.
I'm glad you started with me because I think I'm in a very unique situation running as an independent. One of the great things that I've been able to do is to work with the guy I'm running for office with, and that's Bill Walker. We've been able to talk exactly about what we're going to do together, what our plan is together, the relationship that we have now. We've been doing a constant vetting. We talk with each other constantly about the future of Alaska, about the problems of Alaska, about how to go forward and work together. And I have specific areas of expertise, and I really would not be interested in running for this position if I was not able to share those once we're elected. And so we're going to have a much different relationship. It's not shake hands between the governor and the lieutenant governor after the primary because you finally get to meet who you're running with. And you're exactly right, the relationship has been terrible in some cases. And in our case, it's going to be good. It's already a good relationship. We get along very well. We agree on a vast number of issues. And he's willing to take the experience that I have. I have experience in at least 4 or 5 primary areas on Alaska Native issues, on military and veterans affairs issues, Department of Fish and Game or wildlife and fisheries issues. And those issues that, well, I can list them all. I guess Arctic policy is the other one. And I have a tremendous amount of experience and a lot of energy to put towards these. And we're going to work together, and he's going to allow me to use my expertise to make the state a better place.
So Bob, how do you envision a working relationship between the lieutenant governor and governor?
I envision a great one, and you mentioned some cases that were not that great, but you don't aspire and say, well, what's the most dysfunctional thing out there? Let's shoot for that. You try and find really positive relationships. Every day I wake up and go to teach, I know I'm doing something that's meaningful. So I would never trade that for something that's meaningless. So I met with Fran Ulmer and had a great conversation with her because I view her as one of our best lieutenant governors of all time. Also met with Lieutenant Governor Garcia of Colorado. And they both told me the same thing. If you can form a partnership and collaborate with the governor, you can really increase the effectiveness of the executive branch and really accomplish a lot. You can use it as a bully pulpit. You oversee the division of elections. You can do a lot of great things. And so when I met with Byron Malott, and I've met him several times and had meetings with him, he's inspiring, he's amazing, and I can't wait to work with him. And he's a highly respected Native leader. He knows business. We also, we're going to win over the majority of Alaskans. Not just Democrats, but independents and Republicans. I live in the Mat-Su Valley, and we have to come up with a vision that includes all Alaskans. And so I'm very excited about being lieutenant governor. It's the only thing I'm thinking about, and it's going to be a great experience.
Hollis?
The job is a lot of what you make out of it. And, citing Fran Ulmer is a good idea. She was an outstanding lieutenant governor who brought a lot of energy and passion to the job. Having a legal background, I think, gives you the ability, as I do, to handle a wide portfolio of problems. I've known Byron for over a decade. I was considering competing against him for the job, but given his stature, I decided to take a step back. And I think that's helped us get off on the right foot with one another. But really, it's about the passion you bring to the job every single day, your willingness to take any portfolio and run with it, and your ability to work with members of the legislature. I've been in the legislature for over a decade. I can help those relationships to actually count for something. They can help you smooth the way. They can help you work the system. And so I look forward to doing all those things, no matter what I'm called upon to do.
A lot of people don't really know the full functions. I think some of the things that the lieutenant governor does might surprise them. And, aside from some of the formalities of swearing in officers, but or swearing in legislators. But one of the things that they do is, they certify state regulations before they go into effect. And what I was wondering about is, if there were a regulation that you didn't agree with, how would you handle that? And there was actually a case in history. I think Lieutenant Governor Lauren Lehman disagreed with a bill and wouldn't certify it, a regulation that was going to go into law. And so I'm just kind of wondering, if you had to sign a regulation that you didn't agree with, how would you approach it?
That's out of bounds. I mean, you're bound by the statutes that are passed and the regulations if they are in making the statute go into effect. Your job is ministerial. You're not a one-man legislature. You don't have veto power. That's what the governor has. So you've got to just do your job and knuckle under and accept that. If you want to change the statute, go about that. I was the chairman of the Administrative Regulation Review Committee, so I spent a lot of time working on the subject, and I know a fair amount about it. It's always fun to say you're going to be tough and to reject things, but that's just that's an abrogation of your duties. Just today, though, I mean, just while we're on the subject of the lieutenant governor's duties, we saw the power of the lieutenant governor to decertify a potential initiative, to say no to stopping set netting on the Kenai River and on the Kenai Peninsula. That's an enormously powerful function that the lieutenant governor oversees because of his role over the Division of Elections.
I think it's very important that that person who's lieutenant governor is someone who's trusted, and someone who's doing the role to the best of their ability and is always thinking what is best for all Alaskans. And that is also doing the role. It isn't, if your job is to certify and all the criteria have been met, you certify. Or if there's something you like but it doesn't meet the criteria, you don't certify. That's not the time to play cowboy. If you want to be a cowboy, go to Valley Performing Arts and audition. They have all kinds of plays, and I'm sure they have a cowboy one coming up. But that's not the role of lieutenant governor.
I completely agree. Coming from a wildlife background, I imagine that there will be countless Board of Game and Board of Fish proposals, and I'm not going to agree with all of them, but the job is to certify, so you really don't have a choice.
Let's talk a little bit about the petition that the lieutenant governor just rejected, the petition to ban set netting. He said that he would not let that petition go forward because it violated the state constitution, and he relied on an opinion from the Department of Law that said that the Constitution deems fisheries and anything like game or certain assets of the state. So the Constitution can't give voters that right to decide what to do with, quote, state assets. But what if you disagreed with that opinion? What other, maybe it isn't this, but it's something you felt was very, very wrong, that the Department of Law's opinion didn't seem like it was right to you. What might you do? And I'll begin with Bob. How would you handle that? You felt something very, very wrong was happening. Because you don't have to accept the Department of Law's position, do you, or don't you?
If the criteria has been met to certify, or if it hasn't, and it means do not certify, then you do that. You do your position, you do the role that you're supposed to do. I always look through the lens of what is best for all Alaskans, not just a few, but for all Alaskans, and you try and act within that vein. So I'll give you an example. I was very disappointed when our current lieutenant governor came out and praised the Supreme Court's ruling that basically gutted a major portion of the Voting Rights Act. And as lieutenant governor, you oversee the Division of Elections. I'm a passionate supporter of the Voting Rights Act, so I vehemently disagree with that decision. I thought it was very unfortunate that he praised that decision. But that has changed, and my job as lieutenant governor is still to try and do everything I can with what is still there to increase access and access to early voting for all Alaskans. And just because a ruling changed or the landscape shift, it doesn't mean you give up or you walk away, but you look at what the overall goal is, and it's the goal to connect all Alaskans to their government and make this a state government they can be proud of. And so that's what I would do.
Craig, what if you disagreed with the opinion from the Department of Law? How would you handle that?
Well, having been a state employee, I have disagreed with the Department of Law. I think it's a matter of, the department gets to do what they think is best when making a decision, or the Board of Game, or the Board of Fish, any of those that have Department of Law representation. The Department of Law is going to caution them if they're getting outside of their areas of responsibility or areas of authority, and it behooves the board, of course, to stay within those areas of authority. So if you're within your area of authority and the Department of Law is just cautioning you that it may not be the best course of action, it's still incumbent upon you to make the decision that you think needs to be made. So having said that, you don't always have to agree with the Department of Law, but it's in a lot of cases it may be unwise to go against what they have to say because of their experience in case law.
Hollis?
You know, it's a great question, and it's probably worthy of a longer discussion about the philosophy of government and the philosophy of representative government and how far you can go in violation of your own beliefs while trying to respect the rule of law and the majority will. You know, it sort of depends on whether it's a close call or whether it's not a close call. If it's a close call and you've got a competing legal opinion, well, then you can probably make a decision. If it's absolutely violative of your own internal conscience and you just totally believe it's wrong, let me give you an example. Death penalty, right? You may see a citizen's initiative demanding a death penalty. I'm opposed to that. I think it's wrong. And if it came to my desk and you had to certify it and you're completely opposed to that, you may have to resign. You may have to say, you know what, I'm never going to put my thumbprint or my sort of imprimatur on a death penalty piece of legislation. And that may be the right thing to do under those circumstances.
All right, thank you. You know, we've heard a lot of discussion. In fact, I think the legislature has been obsessing on federal overreach. It's one of those issues we know will come back this year. And there's a lot of discussion about state overreach with HB 77, the permitting bill involving DNR, in which this bill would give DNR more authority in certain areas. It would give the commissioner authority, would streamline permitting, but opponents say that it's an overreach, that it would take away the public's right to know about projects, to weigh in. So, you know, I guess in the general subject of overreach, what areas of government, be it state or federal, are we experiencing overreach? And we'll start with Craig.
I think we could probably list 100 things. I'm not a big fan of government overreach. If we talk about the federal government, we can name 100 things. If we talk about state government, we can name 100 things. I don't think that the federal government, for example, should be able to tell Alaska that you can or you cannot build a road to connect two communities. Every other state in the country, every other community in the country has been able to connect the communities in their state for commerce, for safety, for whatever reasons. Yet in Alaska, in the lower 48, there's this image of Alaska, and that image is basically us being this beautiful, picturesque scene that they never want to see changed. But they have to remember that we have to live here. We live with the resources that are around us, and we're going to continue to live in this environment, and we have responsibilities to each Alaskan that's out there. So when we can't connect a community because the federal government is saying, no, you can't do that, then that's overreach that we shouldn't stand for. And I understand that there are some controversial issues around environmental protections and good conservation, and we need to be conscientious of those things, but we have to step forward and develop our resources, connect our communities, and make sure that our communities are safe. Now, that's one example. There are dozens more examples. I think the Affordable Care Act is very far overreaching. It's something that we should step far away from. It's costing trillions of dollars in a time that we can't afford to spend a tenth of what it's going to cost, and it's forcing Alaskans, Americans, to partake in something that we don't necessarily want to partake in. That's overreach into the individual citizen. The list goes on and on.
Hollis, you want to take a stab?
You can never go wrong bashing the federal government. You can just do it all day long, and it's really unfortunate because I think it breeds sort of a hostility of purpose in a nation's citizenry about who we are and how we work together. That being said, I think one area where there is some significant overreach happening right now is in the area of privacy. Most Alaskans feel like they have we have a constitutional right to privacy, And yet every one of us in this room likely has one of these things. And if you believe that the government can snatch the records out of the cell phone and read your emails and listen to your voicemails and see inside your thoughts through your cell phone, that's wrong. And I believe that there'll be a huge effort in the next few years to try to suss out exactly where the legitimate needs of government arise with respect to criminal prosecutions and stopping terrorism, and where most citizens have a right to be private in their photographs, in their personal effects, in their cell phone records, and in their emails. And I think right now all the evidence is that it's swung way too far onto the side of the government.
Bob?
I would agree. I think we do have a right of privacy, and I believe I'm the only lieutenant governor candidate that's been on the government's no-fly list. And it was a very frustrating experience to always have to go there, stand in line with a bunch of angry people, go through a long process to finally be allowed to board a plane. And I eventually had someone tell me, well, there's someone who has a name, and Bob Williams is a very common name, that used your name as an alias that has the same birthday as you, and that's why you were triggered. And I'm like, well, how do you undo it? And it turned out to be a really long process that was very frustrating, and eventually led to getting a letter from Homeland Security telling me that I was never on the list, which wasn't true either. So I think when you experience something personally, it's frustrating. But I think in general, we have to be honest. And that is, the whole federal overreach debate has been used as a distraction from really examining state performance. Things that we should be doing as a state that we're not doing. We're going to have a chance to bring in forth. We've got the Alaska economy there's three legs on that stool. There's the oil industry, there's the federal government, and then there's everything else. And so if we're kicking on that one federal government leg over and over again, which is around 28% of our economy this year, that's ridiculous. To have a federal overreach summit here and bring everyone in to have speeches, and the federal government isn't even part of it. I don't even know why they call it a summit when the federal government isn't here. That's ridiculous. So to me, a lot of the federal overreach discussion has just been a distraction for us to not really focus on state performance of our officials. And that's what we need to focus on. What's best for all Alaskans, and we need to hold our politicians, our legislature, and our governor accountable.
Well, Hollis, like you said, everybody, it's a free pass to bash the feds for overreach, but are there instances of state overreach where the public should be concerned?
Well, that's why we have, we're going to let this person just...
I think the feds are trying to interfere here.
That's how clearly people in the state agree with you, because that's why the 90-day session passed. When I first was elected, we went down to Juneau and worked for 120 days. When Tom Wagner and Jay Rammers proposed a 90-day session, I wasn't necessarily supportive of that. I thought it restricted our ability to do long and serious and thoughtful review of laws, and to sort of be an important check on the power of the governor to be in session more often. But that passed. Citizens are sort of suspicious of government. That's inherent in our liberty-loving nature as a country and as a people. So I think it's a tension. There's always a tension between what citizens sort of suspect what's happening and what's really going on. That's why one of the things I pushed really, really hard for in Juneau was webcams in every single committee room. The gavel-to-gavel videos that we watch are paid for by the city of Juneau. The legislature doesn't even pay for them. And I realized that huge amounts of important work were happening in Juneau without the public's ability to know what was going on. So I pushed for it, and we got webcams now in every single committee room. You can watch what's going on in every single committee room whenever there's a committee hearing happening there by turning on your computer. And of course, we're the most wired state in the nation, and so I think it's a net benefit. But people are definitely suspicious.
Bob, state overreach?
I think that the biggest thing we have is that we all have to realize is that we can change things in the state. If you're unhappy with a politician or with a current administration, you can change that. You can vote. So getting more people to connect to the democratic process and feel like they have an impact, you can change policy. So all I've run into so many people that are apathetic and cynical about state government. And I really want to work to have a state government that we're proud of and that Alaskans are proud of. And so if there's state overreach, there's a political process to change it. And have either change the minds of people who are policymakers, or to replace them. And so if it's a big issue, all you need is to gather a big enough coalition to make changes. That's the great part about living in a democracy.
Craig?
I think there's state overreach in a number of places, and one in particular is the idea or the thought that government employees can do things better. And we don't see many good examples around the state of public-private partnerships where you have a state agency, a state entity that reaches out to the public and says, how can we work together to do a better job? I think that most anything the government gets involved in ends up costing more than it should. Most everything they get their hands on is run worse than it could be. And so I look for every opportunity for public-private partnerships, and I think the idea, coming from Fish and Game, I can tell you there are countless examples of where the department would not engage in public-private partnerships in places where we could do a lot better work. For example, one project that we should be working on is a private lands wildlife management thing where the state of Alaska could partner with tribes, the largest landowners in North America, to do a better job of managing fish and wildlife resources on native-owned lands. But they continue to reject the principle because they don't want to spend resources on what they would consider private property for the benefit of those folks. It's not entirely true that that would be the end result, but the problem there is, I think, state overreach, meaning they're too powerful. They don't want to bring the public in to create those partnerships and to do a better job of managing a state. That goes throughout state government. It's not just isolated to Fish and Game, but that's where my experiences are.
Craig, we can tell from what you said so far that you're very supportive of tribes, and I thought maybe we would just give Bob and Hollis a chance to respond to that. How do they feel about the state's relationship with tribes? And we'll start with Bob on that.
I guess I would describe the situation you described. I agree with many pieces of it. I guess I would call that state underreach. You have to build trust. And I think our state has done a very poor job of building trust with Alaska Natives. I worked in Sabunga and Gamble on St. Lawrence Island, and sometimes I'd get a break. I'd go to the Sabunga store and just sit down and have a cup of coffee with the elders. And many times found that what we were trying to do in public education was perceived very differently. And just having those conversations, all of a sudden I became Bob Williams, the guy drinking coffee in the Sabunga store. We could have a dialogue. We have to build trust. And so I don't really view that as state overreach. I view that as state underreach. And we've made a lot of decisions as a state that I think that are not respectful to Alaska Native groups. And we need to do a better job. And we need to listen. We need to listen.
Hollis, could we do more to support tribes?
We can do more to support the whole state by going back to the two things I talked about at the opening. Lower cost energy, better education system. Those two things right there are the building blocks of a strong society. And it works in Bethel, it works in Fairbanks, it works in Anchorage, it works in Ketchikan.
Now, we have a question from the audience about asking the lieutenant governors what their plans are for education. So why don't we start with you, Craig? The person specifically said, what are your plans for rural Alaska education, energy, resource development? It's a lot to answer in one question, but maybe you can give it a try.
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to back up and say a little bit more. One of the on the tribe stuff, because I did talk about it, but it was in my other time, so I'd like to respond. One of the big problems, Bob, that tribes have, or that is put onto tribes, is the fact that we don't even engage them in conversation the right way. For example, you just used the term groups, native groups. We don't like to be called native groups. We like to be called tribes. I'm a tribal member. I'm Gwich'ajé Gwich'in, and I'm a tribal member. I'm not a native group. And I'm not saying that as a slap. I'm just saying that this mentality that they're just another group of people is missing the boat. And it's really important that we do what Hollis said in those communities, because that is the water that's going to float all boats. But there's still a problem that goes even deeper than that. Alaska Natives want to talk about subsistence. This is an issue that's important to them. So having a job is not going to resolve the issue of subsistence. Alaska Natives want to talk about sovereignty. Having low-cost energy is not going to resolve the issue of sovereignty. We have to bring folks to the table and get those issues resolved. I don't know what the steps forward are. It may take 20 years to get it solved. But we can't just say, let's give some folks some jobs and reduce energy costs. Those are good things, Hollis. They're very important things. We have to do that for all of Alaska, but that isn't going to resolve the issues between Alaska and the Alaska Natives.
Well, we'll go to the education issue, but since we're on the tribal sovereignty issue, let's go to Hollis. Do you have any response to what Craig had to say?
Those are good points, and one of the areas where I think the state has really been dropping the ball is in the area of adoptions and child custody. This administration is just taking the wrong path time after time after time and trying to overturn adoption decisions made by tribes with the best interests of their memberships at heart. There was a horrific case of intervening really on the behalf of a batterer that was just unconscionable. And so I think there's a lot of ground we need to make up and a lot of work we need to do. And I think empowering people to make decisions locally, no matter whether they're tribal members or anybody else, is a good idea.
Bob, any further comments before we move on to education?
I'm always surprised sometimes. Like even in when I am talking in my classroom, I'm very, and sometimes I'll have a student try and characterize an ethnicity or a group of people and say, well, they this, and I jump them on really quick and say, how have you, what evidence have you gathered to say they, as if you're going to characterize an entire group of people? Because I'll tell you, I've been amazed at the diversity of opinion when I'm visiting in Sabunga or Gamble or Nome. And so I think we have to bring in a level of respect and listen and realize that we're building partnerships with people and tribes. And if we don't bring in it, when we bought the state of Alaska, and this is shocking, but when we bought the state of Alaska, Alaska Natives were not considered citizens. And so we have to listen, we have to learn, and we have to come in as partners. And if we are doing anything that's heavy-handed or disrespectful, it's a shame. And I have more than 20 years in education, listening, learning, and leading. I plan to bring that to the office of Lieutenant Governor.
So let's go to education, because we have a person here in our audience that wants to know about rural Alaska and specifically how we might improve education, energy, resource development.
That is a big suite of topics. So education, I think it's a really tough situation. I think we have to work closely with teachers. I think we have to work closely with parents. I think parents need to be more empowered in their children's education, have to have a lot more involvement and a lot more say in how we go forward. I don't like the idea that instructions come down from Washington, D.C. and tell us how we're going to educate our kids and what the standards must be. I think we need some sort of standards, but I think parents need a much stronger role. Having said that, I think that the education system that has decided to tune all of us towards college degrees, I think that's really not necessarily the right fit for Alaska. It's partially a right fit. It worked for me. I went to college. But I think that there's a really big component missing that a lot of Alaska youth out in rural Alaska are interested in, and that's vocational training. We had vocational training when I was a kid. I liked it. I think everybody else I knew liked it. And when the funding for vocational training was taken away, that really separated the potential for those kids to move into a lot of the career opportunities that we have in Alaska. So I think we need to go back and look at rekindling that for Alaska.
Right.
Do you want me to address the other parts or give folks
I tell you what,
chance?
we probably need to move on because we're getting close to the end of our time here. So I'm going to ask Hollis the same question.
It's a huge topic. We could talk about it for hours,
I know.
and you can sense Craig's passion for it.
In a nutshell,
I'm sure Bob will give us a long lesson on the great ideas he has for education. Let me just mention one specific, though. It's something I've gotten more and more passionate about over the last couple of years, and I'm pushing right now on a bill in the legislature, and I'm actually thinking I'm going to get some headway. I was just talking to Senator Dunleavy about this today, and that's statewide voluntary pre-kindergarten. It's one of the single things we're lacking in the state. That's the most sort of glaring missing piece in our education puzzle. As the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I held hearings on the single most effective way to reduce the crime rate. And you know what it is? Head Start. Head Start will lower the crime rate at a greater cost effectiveness than any other single method you can think of, besides the educational advantages. So I'm really getting behind this idea. It's something we've got to expand. We've got Head Start, we've got a pre-K program. We went out to Alacacket and Minto and looked at the way it's operating in some rural areas, but there's great opportunity for expanding pre-K.
Bob?
A lot of our biggest problems are that we come up with a giant idea of how we're going to change something, but we don't look at quality. I was in the first group of statewide mentors that in 2004 to 2006, and there were like 150 people applied for the position. They picked 20. I was one of the 20, and I worked in Savunga, Gamble, Nome, and in the Matsu area. And what I found, I actually had a principal of a village tell me that I would never make a difference, because one of the problems is teachers leave. They stay a couple of years or 1 year and then they leave, and so there's no institutional knowledge, and there's all these people, new people, well-meaning people go in and make the same mistakes over and over again. And I had this principal tell me I wasn't going to make a difference. Well, if teachers aren't feeling effective, or if they aren't feeling like they're connecting with kids, and then I go in and I model a lesson and I show them something and they realize how to personalize something, and all of a sudden they feel effective, it makes a huge difference. Because when you're teaching and kids are learning, there's nothing like it. There's absolutely nothing like it. And so all these discussions, we have to have more ways to make teachers feel effective and be effective, and have teachers staying longer in villages. And so, yeah, we have to support education. And when we have an education task force that just came out, their results are very troubling, because they're talking about reducing spending. And so when we make billions of dollars to oil industry without any accountability, and then we look to public education and say, well, we're going to have to make some cuts. And then when we come time to, rent our legislative offices here in Anchorage, and you'd think we won the lottery, that we have to go back to common sense and realize that there's not a problem we face where education is not part of the solution.
Hey, Bob, we have a couple more questions. I didn't mean to interrupt you, and I know it's time to go pretty soon. So I guess I'll just have a show of hands. Do you want me to ask these additional questions, or do you want me to wrap it up? So those that want out, say so or forever hold your peace. All right. So we have two questions from one member of the audience, but I'll just ask one in the interest of time, and we'll start with Craig. Does it concern you that we have changed our oil tax system 4 times in 20 years? This member of the audience believes it's unstable for business. Let's keep the answer short to this.
Yes, I think business needs to have a stable platform to function. I think a good low oil tax structure is the way to go forward. In this case, with the governor's multi-billion-dollar give back, I would have asked for some things in return. I would have treated it as an investment on our future and said, if we're going to give you this, then we expect something back. But yes, we need stability in our tax structure.
Bob?
I think this is another case where we kind of have wimpy leadership by our administration, wildly inaccurate, misleading, and partisan. And that we have to be really clear. There's no reason for Alaska to sell its oil at a really low price. And so if you look at, we're caught up in this discussion right now since SB 21 is coming in, kind of, well, it'd be around the same amount of revenue. We don't just look at these last few months. You have to look out for years. And when you have Tim Bradner saying that this is going to change the oil company profits, on their percentage of profits from 26% to about 38%, that's long term. And we're giving away all the high end. So we have to do what's best for all Alaskans. And that is it is just a terrible, terrible bill, and we have to change it.
Thank you, Bob. Hollis?
Let me clue you into something. You can tell when oil taxes are too low. You know how you know when they're too low? When the industry says we need stability. Okay. They didn't ask for stability under ACEs. They begged for a change. And so you just know right now oil taxes are a little too low.
All right. Question on public safety from the audience. Hollis French complimented Governor Parnell on his stance on public safety, because the governor has hired VPSOs. However, this member points to a problem that VPSOs are not permitted to investigate crimes, certain kinds of crimes, I guess. And I guess this questioner has concerns that the VPSOs are not robust enough as law enforcement officers. They don't have enough authority. And I guess why don't we start with Bob on this one, because we've kind of been trying to mix it up.
I think that's a situation where you need to listen to what the needs of our village, what people want. You have to build trust. You don't want to bring in people if there isn't the trust in the village. You want to listen to the concerns, and you want to build a program. If there's additional training that's needed, how much it costs. But we have to bring down our rates of suicide. We have to bring down our rates of sexual assault. We have to bring down our rates of violence. And it has to be whatever it takes. We can't look at a Choose Respect campaign and think that that's going to do it. A parade isn't going to do it. And we have to do whatever it takes, and we have to make this a priority.
Craig?
That's exactly right. A Choose Respect program that doesn't do anything to reduce those problems throughout Alaska is not really a good program at all. But to answer your question, the VPSO program it's a good idea. The thought behind it is a good idea. And maybe it is worth a congratulations, but the real problem is they don't have authority. They don't have the kinds of authority that they need. And so what they end up doing is they stand off from a situation. If it's some sort of an assault or some sort of another major crime, the VPSO has to stand off, or he or she is going to put their life on the line with no ability to defend themselves. So they stand off and they call the troopers. And it still takes the troopers days to come in to take care of a problem. So you end up with an extra set of eyes on the ground. That part of it is pretty good. And what we've done is we've peppered these VPSOs throughout the state, thinking that we've solved the problem or that we're working towards solving the problem. It's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't go far enough. We need qualified police training. And what that means is we either need to keep our VPSOs in school maybe 6 weeks longer in order to get them qualified so they can do the right kind of job, or we need to have more troopers on the ground. But the VPSO program as it stands is not strong enough.
All right, thank you, Craig. Hollis?
It'd be nice if we could have an Alaska State Trooper in every village, but I don't think that's going to happen in towns that are under 200 per population. You just can't sustain that economically. You've got to have a basic level of law enforcement there, and the VPSOs are the best idea we have right now. I will stand by my point, which is it's good to add VPSOs. The governor has put more VPSOs in his budget. I have supported those budgets. I have voted for them. And in the years past, I have advocated for more when the governor was not in favor of that. So I'm not going to turn my back on a governor that does something I like just because I disagree with him on so many other topics.
All right, quick question and just a very brief answer, and we'll go to Craig. You think that VPSOs should be armed?
If they have the proper training, yes, then they can be regular police officers.
Bob?
With proper training, yes.
Same answer.
All right, now we have one final question. It's the last one. This is from our audience, and the question is that we have a mixed economy in rural Alaska, and we have a subsistence economy, a rural economy, and we have an urban economy in our state. And so, what can we do to bridge the gap between those, as far as education, jobs, solving some of the logistical issues? I'm going to start with Bob.
One thing, we have a scholarship program in our state that makes it very, very difficult for rural Alaskan students to achieve. So we need to make sure that when we're designing programs, that it isn't just thinking about urban areas. We have to make sure that we're thinking of all Alaskans. And our rural Alaskans are a vital part. When we're thinking about voting rights, we have to think about here, when we're talking about voting, and that's what the Lieutenant Governor oversees Division of Elections, we're looking at urban voters having 6, 7, 8 times to swing the bat at voting because they have access to early voting. Rural voters do not have the same access to that. So one of the things we have to do, every situation we face, we have to ask ourselves, how do we help and include and value rural voters and rural residents?
Thank you, Bob. Hollis?
Renewable energy and education. You just got to focus on those two. And let me just give you one specific example. Every village in western Alaska should have a wind diesel power generation system for its own village. You get technicians to run that. You get lower cost electricity to help you live and to exist. There's just so much good that comes from small investments in things like wind diesel projects that we've actually begun to make some headway on. We just have to keep going in that direction. Low cost energy, powerful education system.
Craig?
Those are good ideas, but I think the points that are missing there is we need to communicate with those communities and talk to them about what their future holds for them. But we can't sit here, or the three of us around a table, and decide what's going to happen in Arctic Village or Tuntatuliak. We've got to go and talk to those folks and say, what do you see as the future of your community? How much of a mixed cash subsistence economy do you want to live? If it's 90% subsistence economy, then we need to do what we can to enable them to take care of themselves and live on the land and not interfere with that, if possible. If their choice is 50-50 or more the other way to have more cash, then we need to do these sorts of ideas that you've already heard here and create more job opportunities for those communities. And of course, education, as has already been said, is an anchor to all of that.
Well, we've had a very patient audience, and I thank you all for hanging with us. But since we had Hollis begin first with the opening statement, I think we'll go to Craig to start off the closing statements for the evening.
How much time are you giving me?
Well, be merciful to them.
I have two versions, so I'll give you the medium length version. On October 14th, in Fairbanks at the Doi Unlimited headquarters, I announced my candidacy for Lieutenant Governor to run as a nonpartisan, unaffiliated candidate alongside gubernatorial candidate Bill Walker. My campaign will emphasize the importance of incorporating all Alaskans' voices into our decision making and bringing us together to work towards solving the major problems that have kept us divided. Alaskan politics is no longer just for the well-connected and the well-to-do. It has been difficult because political parties choose themselves over people. It is the parties that refuse to find common ground necessary to resolve our differences. Some in leadership would rather draw lines in the sand and pick sides for combat. Why should we do that? Our combined ideas for the future, that's all of us, our combined ideas for the future are far more important than picking which party we represent. The Lieutenant Governor's job is clearly spelled out as elections overseer, keeper of the state seal, protector of the Constitution, and other similar tasks. I will faithfully discharge these duties. But as a strong Lieutenant Governor working cooperatively, not adversarially with the Governor, we will accomplish far more in the best interest of Alaskans. I'm not a politician, as you can see. I'm an Alaskan. I'm a problem solver. I'm your neighbor. I'm a uniter. And my ultimate goal is to bring Alaskans together. Let's re-energize Alaska together. I need your signatures so I can be put on the ballot, and I need your vote. Thank you very much.
Rob?
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you to the YWCA for giving us this venue. And I hope you've enjoyed this conversation and this discussion. I'm Bob Williams, and I'm going to make a difference. When I ask myself, why am I running for Lieutenant Governor? It's because I want to make a difference. When I was a freshman in college at UAF, we were coming back, and 10 of us in a vehicle that went off the road and rolled. And a good friend of mine died in the accident, and I broke my neck. And I was taken by ambulance to Healy, and then to Clear Air Force Base, and then we flew to Fairbanks. And the doctor told me if my vertebrae had moved 1/8 of an inch more, that I'd be paralyzed from the neck down. So I'm a happy guy. No matter what happens, if I'm just walking, everything, I'm a happy guy. But when I think about the state of Alaska and the direction we're going and things that are happening, we have to see a change. And we need people in government coming from the middle class. It's really hard to get there from the middle class. I'm from the lower rungs of middle class. But I know I can make a difference. And I know I'm going to make a difference. I'm the Alaska 2009 Teacher of the Year, a presidential awardee for excellence in mathematics teaching, was one of 4 Americans selected to go to Singapore to present as top teachers. But the greatest award I've ever received was a stole given to me in 2008 by a girl named Lexi. And she cut it off, and she put a note on it. And it said, "You made a difference. I'd never cared for math, but your calculus projects, your songs, your calculus t-shirts, all of those things, I'm going to take my calculus project with me wherever I go. And you made a difference. I'm not going to tell my parents because they might disown me, but I'm going to minor in math." and
Boy.
and that is the greatest award I've ever received. And so I want to be not just a lieutenant governor, but I want to be a great lieutenant governor. So that 5, 10 years from now, you come here and you're going to say, well, let's wear a cheap piece of clothing because I'm going to cut off a piece and put a note on him and tell him what a great job he's done. So thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to being your next lieutenant governor.
Hollis?
Thanks. At the beginning of the debate, I laid out a positive vision for the future of the state, a vision centered on renewable energy and education. I think we can get there if we make the right collective choices. But one choice we have to make this year is to send this administration packing. The Parnell administration is not leading us in the right direction. We're seeing cuts to education instead of more investment. We're seeing shrinking capital budgets that imperil our ability to build the kind of Alaska that you and I believe in. We're seeing a hard-hearted attitude towards Alaska's working poor. And we're seeing our fiscal stability threatened by the oil tax giveaway. And finally, just today, with the revelation of these new regulations, we're seeing a continued hostility towards a woman's right to choose. I want to put Alaska on a better path. I believe that my record in the Senate demonstrates that I can work with both sides and get things done. That's what I want to do as Lieutenant Governor. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. I look forward to talking to you after this event. My phone number's in the book. I'm easy to get a hold of, and have a great night.
All right, let's have a hand for the candidate.